Before we get started, I would like to thank our Assistant Director, Mylinda Smith, for coordinating our guests this evening, and to Amanda Griffin and Brian Tibbins for making it happen. In 2014, my predecessor, John Nicholson, started a speaker series, which he called Sports Matters, to highlight where sports and social issues intersect. Syracuse 8 is exactly that. I am thrilled, honored, and so excited to hear from them tonight. I would like to introduce our host this evening, a friend of mine, play-by-play announcer for ESPN and proud alum, Beth Mowins. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you very much, Olivia, and thank you to everyone who can join us tonight. We're excited as we welcome you to the Syracuse Sports Media Center presentation of a conversation with the Syracuse 8. Actually, 9 men, right, who saw the need for change and had the courage to do something about it, leading to one of the most impactful moments in the history of Syracuse athletics. Tonight, we welcome Greg Allen, Ronald Womack, Alif Muhammad, Dana Harrell, Clarence McGill, and John Lobon, who are with us today. The other men, Richard Bulls, John Godbolt, and Dwayne Walker. First, a brief history, of course, of SU athletics, which includes our national championship football team, the legends of Jim Brown and Ernie Davis. Of course, my dad grew up on the south side of Syracuse, used to sneak into Archbold Stadium to watch those guys run like the wind. Dave Bing would arrive a few years later, right, and begin the ascent of the basketball program. And all appeared to be well on the hill. But behind the scenes, it was not. In 1970, the Syracuse 8, members of the football team, advocated for change. Concerned about injustices and shortcomings within the program, they boycotted spring football, sat out the season, and ultimately got the school to admit that there was institutional racism within the athletic department and that change would be coming. But it would come, as our gentlemen here tonight know, with a cost, with sacrifice, with hardship, but also ultimately vindication. Greg Allen, who's with us tonight, I've heard you say that it was a moment where you realized it's more important than me. And to do what you guys did, that's a phrase that's still poignant, of course, present day. After the Syracuse 8, our SU fandom appreciated your sacrifice and enjoyed celebrating opportunities for African-American student athletes to thrive. At the opening of the Carrier Dome on that sweaty night in September of 1980, it was none other than an African-American student athlete, Joe Morris, who was carried off the field after the victory on the shoulders of his teammates. Pearl Washington showed up a few years later and changed the way that America not only looked at the university, but our entire community. And in North Syracuse, a young Beth Mowins proudly wore the number 31 jersey, playing high school basketball. On the undefeated 1987 football team, our national championship squad, it was none other than a black quarterback, Don McPherson, leading the way. When black student athletes back in 69 and 70 weren't necessarily looked upon as having the abilities to all start in the backfield together. In 2003, it was freshman Carmelo Anthony carrying the Cuse to the title, only to return years later to donate millions to improve the facilities for all of SU's athletes. Today, Syracuse football has a black head coach and a defensive coordinator, which you guys advocated for way back in 1969 and 1970. Syracuse features a women's basketball coach who took the team to the national championship game a few years ago. So because of the Syracuse 8, change did come, and we thank you very much for that. Gentlemen, tonight we want this to be a conversation, so please feel free to jump in throughout, share your thoughts, share your perspectives. For those of us joining on the Zoom tonight, you can post questions on the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen, and it's hashtag Sports Matters for all of our social media posts. So Greg Allen, let's start with you, and if you don't mind, take us back to 1969 and 1970 and how all of this came to pass.
Well, thank you, Beth. And that was a great opening, by the way. One of the things I was going to do tonight was read from the Chancellor's Commission report. And it stated that the committee concludes that racism in Syracuse University Athletics Department is real, chronic, largely unintentional and sustained and complicated unwittingly by many modes of behavior common in American athletics and long-standing at Syracuse University. And it was unbecoming behavior for a school of Syracuse's stature. Now that's what Syracuse University said. And I wanted to read that because I think it's very important as we're talking, and Beth, you and I had talked earlier about how the Syracuse 8 events concurs with things that are happening today. And the point of me reading that statement was that Syracuse took it upon itself as an institution to take an inward look at itself, and without trying to soft sell or soft soap their findings, they stated that institutional racism did exist. But more importantly, what they did was they took action to alleviate that, to eradicate that. And I want to make sure that as we're having this conversation tonight, that we give Syracuse University credit as well. 69-70, as you know, was a very tumultuous time in the United States. We had the Vietnam War, there were civil rights, there were demonstrations, and we had our football team was undergoing different pressures. And we as student athletes were also trying to find ourselves, especially, the Black student athletes. One, we were trying to make sure that we were in tune and close contact with our peers and being attuned to what was going on socially, but also trying to navigate our athletic careers at Syracuse University. I won't go on too much. I know that the others have their particular stories, but for me, it was an honor and a privilege to be recruited by Syracuse. Jim Brown was my hero. Floyd Little, Ernie Davis, and all the gentlemen that you mentioned already, Beth. And I just thought it was a great place for an African-American athlete to attend.
Mm-hmm. Clarence, how did the solidarity come about? How did you guys first come together, and what was the urgency that you guys felt to try and create change that you knew possibly you would not experience, but a lot of others behind you would?
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing us together under the auspices of Newhouse. We came together kind of automatic because we were young, Black ball players, and the athletic environment was really kind of very intimate. So you were intimate amongst all players, but moreover, we were intimate amongst ourselves because we had many of the same characteristics, both home and away. So when we found out that we were very, very similar, we really gravitated to a special bond. And then when you're involved in competition, you crystallize that bond a little bit more, based on your competition with each other and the competition with your other teammates and the competition with, other teams that you're playing. So that was really the emphasis.
Mm-hmm. Dana, what were some of the challenges that you guys had to overcome, and in perspective, looking back all these years later, what makes you kind of the most proud of what you were able to accomplish?
Well, first of all, Beth, thank you for having us, and providing this program. There were the usual challenges when you step out and confront an institution. And I would echo Greg's comments, an institution that we loved, but we felt that there were some issues surrounding race, diversity, and just fair play. So we, as a group, but individually, every individual of the Syracuse 8 made an individual decision that something had to be done. And we thought we should address it. We did. And of course, there was the usual pushback. We were called every name in the book. There were demands for us to be kicked out of school, kicked off the team, our scholarships revoked, and so forth. Some fans said if we ever let back on the team, they would stop coming to games. So there were those issues, but we made individual decisions. But as a group, that wasn't tough for us. Our minds were made up. We decided to push forward and speak out and speak on issues that we thought should be improved at Syracuse, and if not for us, for future generations. So it was challenging, but the decision, at least for myself, wasn't difficult, even with all of the external negative comments and pressure. Wasn't difficult at all.
Alif, what was your experience like, as you recall it from those days, and the ability to lean on one another to help you get through those tough times and also stand firm in your beliefs? I think is Alif's microphone muted? I think Alif, your microphone might be muted down the bottom of the screen there. Switching off the headset.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
We always kept Alif quiet, so.
Oh, there he is. He's unmuted now.
This is apropos.
He's got his IT team working on it, it looks like.
He's got enough of them working.
Oh, still not happening. How about you, Ronald, while Alif continues to work on it, what are your recollections of what you guys were able to accomplish back in 1970 and to be able to do it together as a group?
Well, we overcame some great odds. I mean, we came there, and I came there like all the other fellows to play football and to get an education, and was young, naive. I expected, and I really thought in playing football that was the one place that things would be fair, and it was really heartbreaking to find out that racism existed everywhere, even on the football field. And we were given a choice to roll with it or fight it, and we chose to fight it. And saw it through. It was hurtful, but we made our point, made things better for it, if not ourselves, for people coming behind us. And at the same time, we learned we could do something else. We learned we could do something besides play football. It motivated us to shift our prowess from athletic prowess to academic prowess and be more student athletes, and just as compared to being just athletes. And I think that's supported, confirmed just by how everybody's here today that went on to have successful professional careers.
Mute it now while you're not.
I think Alif is back with us. Can you hear us, Alif?
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know if you can hear me though.
Yes, you're good.
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay. Boy, my technician is. I'm sorry. We gotta have a little drama.
The rest of the fellas said this was typical. They've been trying to mute you your entire life. It sounds like you were,
Yeah.
you were one of the leaders.
Self-fulfilling prophecy was coming true. I'm sorry. But let me start over again. Thank you. I thank the creator, and I thank you, and I thank Syracuse. And I concur with all that my teammates have said. I'd like to share some things that I'd ask people to help me focus on. And that was like, in terms of Syracuse. Syracuse is a very, very special place. And I was doing some calculations, Beth, and I figured you had to be a toddler when we were doing our boycott.
Yeah.
My math was correct.
Yes, I was.
Right.
That's all I'll admit to at this point.
Yes. But I want to say that the reason why Syracuse, and some of my teammates have said that for me personally, I wanted an education. And Syracuse offered that. I mean, they offered a dual enrollment, 2 degrees, civil engineering and mathematics, and that was my focus. As all of us, I'm sure, we had opportunities to go many, many other places. And we selected Syracuse, not only for the education, but also was the home and the place of Jim Brown, which was he was very instrumental, and I'm sure drawing us to that place. Also, we wanted to make it better. We love Syracuse, and we've always loved Syracuse, and we always will love Syracuse. And that thing about bleeding orange, I'm beginning to accept it. But you got, like Greg said earlier, the situations and times that we lived in. I mean, there was Jim Brown, there was Muhammad Ali, and there was the Syracuse 8. And if you look at the things that influence and the mentors that each of us or those entities look to, Jim Brown looked to Paul Robeson, a scholar athlete, special person. I mean, Muhammad Ali, I mean, he looked to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was the man behind the men who taught Farrakhan, taught Malcolm, taught Muhammad Ali, taught W.D. Muhammad. The Syracuse 8, all of those things influenced us. I mean, the 68 boycott Olympics, I mean, athletes, and there were those before us, Billy Hunter, the basketball, Vaughn Hopper, Boys High. We were, the shoulders of things that happened before us, and how do we make things better? I don't know if I'm answering your question. Yeah. I don't mean to take up all this time, but I want to thank you. Yes.
I think for a lot of us as student athletes, we're taught about team chemistry and creating change from within and keeping it all in the locker room. And at some point, that must have been a decision that you guys had to make, that we need to take this public to push for change. And, John, perhaps you can start the conversation amongst the group here of how that affected your relationships with the university, with the coaching staff, with your white teammates. John, what was that like to have to make that move as a group, and how it affected your relationships on campus?
Well, Beth, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I don't want to be like Alif. Well, let me just say this here in relationship to, as an echo with a number of things that my teammates mentioned. When you feel that you can make a contribution to a program, and you come in that program and choose to give the old cliche 110% of your effort to participate within that structure, and come to realize at that point, that's not what it was about. It was not based on talent per se, but based on who you were, who you knew. And so therefore, it made it somewhat difficult in order to, one, feel as though you were a part of a system that you felt that you could contribute to. And so my experience with that was, I had an opportunity, in high school, to play on both sides of offense and defense. And when I came to Syracuse, I was recruited for defense, but they needed me to be a center so I could do that. And I started my freshman year as a center, but then I go to my sophomore year, and this is where I experienced the indifference in relationship to the positions that we were somewhat considered not able to, or thinkers, centers, quarterbacks, and middle linebackers. Those were considered thinking positions. Well, in high school, I played both of those positions. So when I got there, they asked me to play offense, even though I was recruited for defense. So I said, well, it's your dime. I'll play wherever you need me to play. I played offense. Their predictions were made that I would be the starting offensive center on the varsity the following year. And that blew up. They put me back on defense, not in middle linebacker, but at a defensive end. I started as a defensive end. So what I'm saying to you was, even though it was a point where we thought we were a part of the system, is that we were relegated to the side and not given the ability to perform and participate that our talent would bring to the table.
So you had, when this all started, you wanted access to the same tutoring service as white players, right? Which was something that was not happening at the time. Better medical treatment for the whole team. So what you just referenced, John, starting positions based solely on merit and having the opportunity to earn them, and then to racially integrate the coaching staff. And originally, right, you got visits from both Jim Brown and Floyd Little at some point, correct? In spring ball and in fall ball. And yet all the while you guys are dealing with this sense of frustration and anger and the prejudice that you see. Greg, how do you channel all that and try and turn it into something positive and something lasting?
During that time period, Beth, one, we did get good counsel from Jim Brown. Jim told us exactly what to expect if we continued the boycott. And of course, it came true. So we knew what we were up against. But as we talked amongst ourselves, and as DJ said, you know, making those individual decisions and looking internally, we all knew that there was something wrong. We all knew that it needed to be corrected. We all knew if we stepped out and it became, when we made it vocal, made it public, all right, that we would be one, probably dismissed from the team, as previously stated. But the other issue was that we were sacrificing our scholarships, our education. And the other piece was those childhood dreams and aspirations that we were making a voluntary decision to walk away from. And for me personally, that was very tough. I had worked, my whole life up to that point, it was 20 years, I guess, and working on trying to position myself to get to the NFL. Here I was at a school like Syracuse University. We had produced so many running backs, had gone to the NFL. I happened to be a running back myself. When we decided to boycott, I was first string on the depth chart. So I knew that I was walking away from a childhood dream. But I also knew that my teammates were doing the same thing because they were also talented ball players. And collectively, we just decided that what is more important? The short game would have been us doing what was beneficial to ourselves. The long game was doing what was best, one, for those who are coming after us and for the university as a whole. And it was a very, very tough decision. I personally consulted with my father because to be quite honest, I was hoping that he would make the decision for me, but he didn't. He left the decision up to me. And after looking back, and as I reflect on everything that we did, and I look at, again, as I said earlier, I look at Syracuse University now, we made the right decision. And just as you had mentioned, Beth, in your opening about how many great African-American athletes came after the boycott, I think it speaks to the sacrifice that we made to create that path for those who came after us.
Clarence, that couldn't have been easy though, while you're sitting out that 1970 autumn, and the team certainly missed you. I think they lost their first 3 games, ended up 6-4 that year. But as Greg references, you guys are 19, 20, 21-year-olds who you want to play football. And what was life like for you? And I'd love to hear some other answers too from you gentlemen. Campus life. What were you doing to pass the time or to continue moving the boycott forward? What was the response from Coach Schwartzwalder and other people around campus?
Well, I could speak to probably the campus life, your initial question. as Greg mentioned earlier, the tumultuous times of civil disobedience and civil unrest at that time, maybe similar to now, present, but there was a lot going on in the country, you know, and moreover, there were other university athletic programs and athletic ball players that were going through some of the same things that we were going through, and also dealing with civil disobedience. University of Washington, University of Texas, Princeton, University of Wyoming, that's famous. Indiana, I mean, you can go on. University of Pittsburgh, Oregon State. So I think one has to realize that because of the many civil disobedient type of racial tension things that were going on at that particular time, it again made us to form a closer bond, not only with each other, but with our classmates, our students, the Syracuse community in general. So there was some real movement in regards to just what we wanted to do and what the country wanted to do. So I'll leave it at that and let somebody else add on.
So Beth, if I could just add a thought.
Sure.
Yeah, obviously the coaches and the athletic department was generally negative on the guys who boycotted. What I call the big money boosters. They were writing letters and notes and telegrams to the chancellor, expressing their displeasure with us, and a few choice names. I can say that because I saw some of the correspondence, and under their signatures, they would write how much they contributed every year. One said, I don't care if we don't win a game. Don't lose to those black boys this year. So, I mean, it was a very vitriolic time, but we were fortunate. And from a standpoint of young men who stepped off the curb into the controversy to try to make something better for Syracuse University. And trust me, from that day to this one, that was our sole intent, to make Syracuse University a better place. We were fortunate in that we had 4 mentors who advised some 19 and 20-year-old guys, 2 black professors and 2 black graduate students working on their PhDs, who advised us and taught us things. The first thing they taught us, Beth, there can be, when you make this decision, there can be no physical altercations. They knew we were young, inner city guys from middle class, working class backgrounds. They want to make sure that we understood that this was not that kind of fight. This was a mental fight in which we had to speak dispassionately and be willing to write down and memorialize our thoughts in writing. It was that type of fight. But most importantly, anytime I have an opportunity to speak, I don't want to overlook the importance of our relationship with Chancellor John Corbally. It was because of that connection we were able to make with him early on. And he understood just what we're saying tonight. He understood that 50 years ago that we were trying to make Syracuse University better, irrespective of what it looked like on the outside. Right. And that report that Greg read from at the very beginning of this program was commissioned by Chancellor John Corbally. He did 3 things. He did 3 things that were important for the Syracuse 8. Number one, when professors, a group of professors went to him and said to him, we don't care what happens with the football piece. Their athletic scholarships are not to be. And secondly, he is the one who told Coach Swartzwalter and the athletic director to hire a black coach. And in 1970, Syracuse University, who engaged a black coach in August of 1970, made Syracuse University one of the first universities in this country to have an integrated coaching staff. And it was done for the first time in Syracuse's history that there was a black coach for any sport at Syracuse. And thirdly, he commissioned that report that, as I said, that Greg read the words from as we started this program. And then shortly thereafter, Beth, they ushered him out.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too, Beth, with the follow up what DJ just said, that our demands, if you look at our demands that we were asking, there was nothing really unique about it. Better academic treatment for all athletes. I mean, that was not just for Syracuse, that was everywhere for all athletes, the way athletes were dealt with during that time. A better medical treatment. I mean, we had a doctor, I won't go into that, the discussion about, but we wanted better medical treatment for all athletes. I mean, this is not profound, dynamic stuff asking for, right? Better academic treatment and better medical treatment. I mean, and judge us by our abilities, not based on our skin color, the content of our character or our abilities on the football field, not based on some, the rule of two, some gentleman's agreement type thing. And then the last thing was that we wanted a coach of color to diversify the staff, which has never been diversified since the beginning of Syracuse University. And you might want to, and Greg can speak to this, is that the mission statement when Syracuse started in 1870, the same time that Cornell and Dartmouth started as universities of higher learning, Syracuse's mission was to service women, indigenous people, and Africans. That was in 1870. Now we're talking in 1970, a group of young men, I mean, fired up inner city. Most of us are first generation college-bound students. And it was interesting, here my teammates mentioned my roommate from West Virginia, Stonewall Jackson. They used to say, "You stonewall up." That meant you were ready, all right, when you did that. But I mean, his coach was from Marshall University. His coach wanted him to go to Marshall. Marshall, the whole team, I mean, may the Creator forgive them, went down in a plane crash. My roommate would have been on that plane if he didn't come to Syracuse.
Yes.
I'll stop. These are things when you reflect and think back.
Yeah.
And also, like, we don't want to dwell a lot on yesterday. What we like to talk about is today and tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
How we can take from that experience and move forward. How do we make university a better place? And also, I want to give credit to the Syracuse community. I mean, they took care of us. I mean, Ben's Kitchen. I mean, we worked at and provided for us and fed us. I mean, the Hood family, the Simmons families. I mean, Greg Allen married a Syracuse woman. I mean, that was like off campus. You know, there was like, I mean, you know, there's a lot of things, I mean, that aren't in the book. And let me plug the book. We do have a book out called Level the Playing Field, the Syracuse Age Story.
I think that's on Clarence's bookshelf right there behind him, or a poster of the book.
Oh yeah, that's right, Clarence. Thanks a lot, there, Big Buck.
Oh wow!
Hey, no, I don't want him to steal the show.
Copy right there.
Right there, leveling the playing field. Thank you, Buck.
So, well, Ronald, take us through. I mean, the report was a huge deal then when the university came through and said, "Okay, you guys were right. You guys have proved a point that we need to make some changes and change the way that we do everything." What was that moment like for you guys when you saw the report and found out that news?
When I first found out about it, it really was a high point that they had indicted Syracuse with institutional racism. But I learned something about power politics in that whole process, because one thing I learned from one of my mentors, he pointed out to me, he said, "But you look at the report, it says they recommend you do this and do this and that. But if you notice, the committee was only given the power to recommend. It wasn't given the power to make changes. So their power to actually to implement the ideas that they stipulated was limited, because they were only given the power to make recommendations. So a lot of that recommendations fell on deaf ears. So even though it was a great report, it didn't have the bite in the end because of the lack of power. And the other thing that, and at that time, like somebody mentioned earlier, shortly after that, Chancellor Corbett got moved out. And I couldn't understand. I said, wait a minute, we're trying to get Ben Schwartzwater moved out. And I said, and the chancellor got moved. And once again, another power lesson came in. Ben was connected with the board of directors. And that's where the power was at, the chancellor. And so while the chancellor was, trying to pull Ben in line, Ben had the board of directors pull the chancellor in line by pushing him out. So those were some, as a young man, me learning something about, power politics and raw. Digressing back a minute to what Bucky said earlier about all the athletes. One thing I remember when we were young, and at one time we considered transferring to get away from all the stuff that going on at Syracuse. But the problem is, like as Bucky alluded to, we looked around the nation and there were protests, athletes, Black athletes were protesting all over the country. So we said, there's no sense running to another school and running the same, so we need to stay here and fight it out. And I caught, stuff when I went home. Alif talked about my old coach at Stonewall Jackson, who did try to get me to go to Marshall when that plane did drop. So I'm so glad I went to Syracuse. But he even ragged on me about Alif. Alif, I never even told Alif this. He told me, Womack, you were a good kid till you went to Syracuse and you started roommating with that guy that was a Black Muslim. And he gave Alif the credit for turning me into a Black activist. He said I was falling around the Black Muslim. I said, oh Lord. And so I was catching all kind of, backlash because see, Ben Schwartzwater is from West Virginia. And all the people knew him, and he's still famous down there. So as far as they're concerned, I went up there and messed with, the king.
Yeah.
And but like I said, the one thing I regretted was learning that they were only given the power to make recommendations.
I'd like to add to what Ron just for a second in regards that Ben Schwartzwater was the Nick Saban of that time. Yeah. He was, a national champion, coach, and he was very influential in among the NCAA dignitaries. So, when we were, challenging his authority to a certain extent and realizing that Ben was the coach that coached the first Black Heisman Trophy winner and Ernie Davis, there was a real dichotomy, there was real conflict, and there was a real effort to understand what we were talking about and what Ben was trying to defend.
Did Ben change at all? John and Greg, you guys did end up going back to play. Is that correct for the following season? What was it like when you went back to the team?
Well, I was the first one to return after 1970, the 71 season. I returned in mid-season after a year and a half layoff. And it seems as though they felt there was nothing wrong. And it was ironic when I returned to the team, I didn't get invited for camp. When I got back, I had to do some schoolwork to get back. And so when I rejoined the team, this is a very interesting story. I joined the team on a Thursday. And that Friday, they were going to Pittsburgh. This is going to be my first encounter with Carmen Jones, Black coach that they hired, that I was not aware of, but they hired. And so my first contact with him was after practice that day. He came to me and said that the coaches wanted me to go to Pittsburgh. And I said, go to Pittsburgh. He says, yeah, they want you to go to Pittsburgh. I said, Coach, I only had 1 day of practice. Why am I going to Pittsburgh? And he made the comment that, well, they wanted you to go just to run down on kickoffs. So I said to the coach, I said, Coach, you may not be aware of this, but I don't run down on kickoffs. And I said, and if I do, I run down under control. I'm not suicidal here. But I can't understand why they want me to run down on, to take a place on a plane, to go down just to run down on kickoff after 1 day of practice. This is my first encounter with him. And with that, I just didn't feel, what we asked for was an advocate. Let's put that on the table. The Black coach we were looking for, we wanted as an advocate. And what I'm saying is, he should have been able to tell them, why would you want him to go down after 1 day of practice and speak on my behalf? I had to advise him to go back and tell them I wasn't going, because that didn't make a lot of sense. So therefore, that was my first encounter with Common Jones at that point in time. The other piece is I decided to not play because I just didn't feel they care about my welfare. They just wanted me to be a part of the team. The position I played, they were getting crushed. So on that Monday, I decided that I wasn't going to play. They sent him to my dorm to get me to come back to play. And I said, Coach, I'm not doing it, because you're not looking out for my welfare. Everything is now for the benefit of the program. But after he sat and took some abuse, I decided to come back. And so I played against Boston College after 5 days of practice in a 1.5 year layoff, and started against Boston College. And this is the piece that's so unique to me. I played a great game. A pro scout came to the locker room and said to me, I can get you drafted in the NFL, no problem. And I appreciated the conversation, but knowing he would have to go talk to Schwarzwaller, and that would be the end of it. But what I'm trying to say is, having the ability to play the game and play it, and yet run into these walls, was the issue that I had to deal with, because it wasn't about the individual player contributing to the program. It was about how they wanted you to contribute to the program. So I played that entire rest of the season, did very well, but knew that that was going to be my last time at some point in time playing collegiate football. And it was a heavy heart that I had to deal with that process.
I know you as well, Greg, right? You had the Syracuse 8 follow you into the pros, and how did that affect your career, and not only the sacrifice you made at Syracuse, but ultimately your pro football career as well?
Yes, I'll give a couple instances. On my return, I got redshirted the year that John returned in '71, so I played in '72. Everything seemed to be fairly normal going on. As John said, no one seemed to be talking about the fact that I was returning from boycotting. I was received well by the coaches. As a matter of fact, that preseason was Joe Perry from who was scouting for the 49ers, came to campus. And after practice, he sat down with me for a moment and said that the 49ers were interested, but he had talked to the coaching staff, and I had this reputation of being what he labeled a troublemaker. And if I wanted to advance, my career or play professional football, I was going to have to do something that year to kind of quell that rumor that I was a troublemaker. I thought everything was going well. I started that year. I started the first 3 games. We had a game. I had a decent game. A reporter came up to me and said, "Hi, Greg, how you doing? Gee, you had a good game." I said, "Thanks." He mentioned a couple plays, and then he said, "Now you're one of the Syracuse 8, correct?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you have any regrets about the boycott?" Well, I knew the correct political answer would be no comment. But I wasn't politically correct at that particular instance. And so I said, "No, I have no regrets about the boycott." So needless to say, that was the only thing that got printed in the paper the next day. The coaching staff saw that, and I didn't get suspended. But I did get demoted for the next 2 or 3 games, and I wasn't allowed to speak to the press, and not even the Daily Orange at that time. I finished the season, had a decent year. I got drafted by the Ottawa Rough Riders, and so I went up to Canada. I had a pretty good preseason. As a matter of fact, the coach had put in the local paper that he thought I was the best athlete in camp. Probably had a game about 2 days after that. The next day, after the game, I got called into the coach's office, and he told me that they were releasing me. And my position coach was in the office at the same time, and I said, "Well, I thought I played decently." He said, "Well, Greg, you did." And the head coach told me that the reason I was being released was because I had too much baggage. And I said, "Baggage?" And he said, "Yes." He referenced the Syracuse 8. And so with that, they released me. Got a call from another coach to come down to Hartford, Connecticut to play. And so I went down. John was on the team, and I sat down with the head coach, with John. And he just told us, quite frankly, "You guys are welcome to play." It was a semi-pro team. He said, "You guys are welcome to play on my team, but just so you're aware, you'll never get to the next level. You've been blackballed to play in the NFL." And I know that Alif and Bucky have a similar story. But I guess to say all that, yes, was I disappointed at the time? A little heartbroken, absolutely. It took me a little while to get over that. But as I thought more and more about my experience at Syracuse and the idea of being connected to the Syracuse 8, I knew that being bitter would only diminish the sacrifice that we made. And actually, I'm stopped calling it a sacrifice, because what we did was we gifted Syracuse University. We gifted Syracuse University our time, our effort, our aspirations, our dreams, because no one took anything away from us. We voluntarily gave up our eligibility and those future careers to make Syracuse a better place. And as Alif and DJ and I think Bucky or somebody else had said about, we bleed orange, we love Syracuse. Well, you usually don't gift people or institutions that you don't love. And so don't call the events of the Syracuse 8 a sacrifice. It was a gift.
We will definitely use that moving forward. And one of the amazing things, I think, is to see just how much you all still appreciate and love the university, that you had to, gift what you did in order to create change at a place that you love. We have a lot of folks on with us. If you've got a question, use your Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen. I know a lot of folks are wondering, of course, with all the good that has come of this, with all the changes that were made at Syracuse, we obviously still have societal issues that mirror some of the same battles that you fought in the 60s, that America fought in the 60s. So, Dana, maybe you can start us on a discussion about what is going through your mind when you watch the events unfolding, whether it was Colin Kaepernick a few years ago or all of the social justice fights that athletes are doing today and taking a stand publicly and putting themselves front and center on this issue.
Yes, I've been asked that question on numerous occasions. And what goes through my mind is a quote by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Some of the same issues, some different issues. Every generation in America is going to have to deal with racial injustice and diversity type issues. It's not going away. It rears its head in different ways, generation after generation. America's very diverse. There will always be a segment of our population who don't want to share America with everybody. So what goes through my mind is that I really, every time I see the rest of the guys, I'm proud of what we did. And I'm proud of the fact that we didn't leave Syracuse University. I'm proud that 50 years ago, we decided to fight for the soul of this great university and to see some of the fruits that have been born. But I think there is no finish line when it comes to racial and diversity issues and social justice issues. I think in every generation, both Black and white Americans are going to have to deal with that issue. And I feel confident that our generation and succeeding generations, they'll do that. So I'm not surprised at all that currently some different issues, but some of the same issues are being dealt with by America right now. I'm a grandparent, and I'm sure my grandson will be dealing with some issues in the United States of America regarding racial justice and diversity type issues many years from now, God willing.
Well, Beth, look what's happening right now. That just this summer, the Pac-12, the players threatened to boycott. Western Carolina University had a problem. Oklahoma State, UCLA, Kansas State, and of course, the University of Missouri in 2015. So it's really came full circle again and again and again when we talk about, we can talk about the Jack Johnsons and the Jackie Robinsons, the Bill Russells, the Tommy Smith and John Carlos, now the Kaepernicks and the Williams sisters, and we can go on and name a bunch of African-American athletes. But it's happening today, and it's really somewhat disappointing as far as I'm concerned, that we keep revisiting the same issues over and over again. And so we just must continue the struggle and continue to fight until all of American society wins.
Thank you, Buck.
I think the extension of what you guys are doing is still evident in the name, image, and likeness, which will be coming up here in the coming months and years as well, in terms of rights for student athletes and the ability to take control of their name, image, and likeness as well. Alif, I know you were going to jump in there.
Yeah, I wanted to say the following, Bucky, a question I could pose to everybody on the panel and people watching is, how can we today cooperate and collaborate for a better tomorrow for Syracuse University and the community and our families? I mean, what can we do? I mean, we have strengths and we have weaknesses. But how can we, I mean, as a team, we're all athletes here. You know, I mean, the power of the team, I mean, that was part of our strength was the brotherhood that we had bonded with each other, but it was each individual. And if you want to look at look at the Treaty of Medina as it connects to the US Constitution, or the Treaty of the Iroquois, or the Treaty of the Ashanti. You know, how do you take these diverse factions and work together on a team for a better situation? So how do we would find tools that are at Syracuse University and Newhouse in particular, make a better tomorrow for the university, for the community, and for our families?
Ronald?
What I wanted to say is that it's very heartbreaking to see that the same kind of racial tensions today go all the way back to our day and before us. And we keep saying it go, and I hear some people saying it goes in a circle. One thing is important to acknowledge is that slavery ended in 1864, but slave mentality never died. And that's really the stem that's through all this behavior from slavery to our time to today. Slave mentality is alive and kicking. And until we, look at it from that perspective, we got to first figure out what we're up against. Mm-hmm. And then we can come together and realize that this is a tall order, but we have to conquer slave mentality.
I'm going to make a comment here, Beth, and it really goes back to what I was saying initially about this self-examination. Your question was about Colin Kaepernick, and we see everything that's going on today and how our story relevant today as it was 50 years ago. And when I think about it, for me, it's that idea of this self-examination that we as individuals need to take a look at ourselves and challenge our own, have biases. But what we fail to do sometimes is challenge them. We accept them. We accept them because it's easy. There's no work involved in accepting any one of your biases. But there is work involved if you try to justify your biases and do self-examination. These guys have heard the story a dozen times, and I'm going to repeat it again because I think it's so important. Had a chance to sit down with a Native American sage, and he related the story to me. He said that in each man's heart, there are two wolves that are constantly fighting. One wolf lacks integrity, is evil in his character, in his characteristics. The other wolf has character, has integrity, and also cares about others. So the question was, if these wolves are constantly fighting, which one wins? And the answer is the one you feed. And so my statement to all of us is that if we talk about making this place, this world, a better place, it begins within, begins with us. It begins with those two wolves. The kind of person I hope to exhibit is that wolf that has integrity, that wolf that has compassion for his fellow man, and that wolf that you could trust. And I think those are the characteristics that all of us need to develop. And they begin by doing an inward look and let them come outward.
Beth, can I add to that comment with Greg?
Sure, John.
Let me, we go back to 1970. And what I've come to realize, even at that point, but it was discovery time. And what I mean by that, it was to discover your who you. What do you see in the mirror? What's in that mirror that you see? And then you got to go within to make that determination. One thing that Syracuse University did for me, through all the controversy, through all the inept and transferable of confusion, was this: I had to know who I was. And with that, develop and build the foundation that was going to be my who you. And one thing that I learned, when you walk in the room, know you're in the room. Stand and stand for something. One of my colleagues said to me one day, he said, John, he says, one thing I've come to realize, all you want is respect. I said, that's what anybody wants, is respect. That's where we got to get to. We haven't gotten there. So it's you know, you got to look within. If you're looking for it, you got to give it. If you don't receive it, don't waste no time with it. Move on. Because I believe time waits for no one and will never wait for anybody. Okay? So we've learned over 50 years that time has moved, but has it moved? Because we're still in the struggle of identity. As you know, I love Greg's relationship with Ben. When Ben asked him about what do you want to be, a football player or black? And Greg says, I'm only going to be a football player a little time in my life, but I'm going to be black all of it. We know that. We live with it. But I feel like I'm sunshine because the mere fact is this here. I'm willing to play and give, but I want respect. And I think that's all we're looking for is respect, because that's how the journey becomes realistic and not playing with the falsities of the moth or that's fake. Alif, if you don't know, between a butterfly and a moth, the moth is the fake. The butterfly is the one that you want to be. So all I want to say is this here. I've given respect and I've earned respect. And as long as I have that on my table, I'm at peace.
Well, and I truly believe that you have earned the respect of the entire Syracuse University committee. And we thank you, as Greg referenced it, your gift to Syracuse. And I hope you all will take a little solace in watching some of your Syracuse sisters who are amongst the WNBA players that did take a stand and that did feel disrespected this summer and did something about it. And there will be a runoff now in that Georgia Senate election, thanks to some Syracuse student athletes and the WNBA.
Yeah,
Amen. Amen.
With that, I will pass it off to Olivia. Thank you so much for allowing me the privilege to be a part of your day, gentlemen. And as a Syracuse alum and sports fan, a sincere thank you as well.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so
Hope we
much.
can do it again, Beth.
I'm taking wolves and butterflies with me tonight. That's for sure.
Not
Thank you
mobs.
so much for hosting tonight. We really appreciate it. And gentlemen, as Beth said, thank you not only for your time tonight, but thank you for what you have done for our universities, not only the athletes, but all of our student body here on campus, and continue to do every day by speaking to our students and sharing all of your wisdom, your memories, and giving us the inspiration to make a change, not only again on this university campus, but as we go out into the world. So thank you all so very much. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is just the start of great conversations that need to happen and we need to have here on campus, especially when it comes to sport. So I wish you all to stay safe, be kind to each other, and thank you so much for your time. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.